Brendan, quick
Yes.
question. Your character, I find, is actually a really interesting character throughout the series. It's interesting to see that in season 2 it's taken a whole different path than what I thought. You know, I never read the book, so I'm basing everything off what I've seen so far.
Okay.
You know, you see nowadays that characters like you that have two sides that they have to show now, and I definitely see that the second side is showing. What characteristics do you think is a big role in the second season that you're relying on?
Well, okay, let me ask the two sides that I'm showing.
Yeah,
What do you mean? Like, in terms
what
of
characteristics are you going to be using in season 2? Because you were very cunning. You're almost like a Saul Goodman type, where he's very, you know, this guy plays on the other side of the rope, and you know, what I mean,
right. That's a fundamental characteristic of Chilton that continues.
Okay.
But then he also, one of the great nice things about this season is that new relationships get formed that we're able to show different sides of the characters, and particularly from meeting Ed and seeing some of the way his relationship, the relationship with Frank develops and the relationship with Ed develops. We begin to learn things about Chilton that I think are new and that he didn't even know about himself. I think he finds himself having responses that he wasn't sure that wouldn't have imagined himself having. I think he gets surprised by his own reactions in some of these situations. And everybody's an extremist this season. Everybody's been placed into very difficult situations. So, you know, you get to see how somebody behaves when the chips are really down.
Thank you.
You bet.
And do you have, if you had the world situation that was brought in at the end with the possibility of nuclear holocaust and everything like that, but your character is still very much focused on rooting out, you know, wrongdoers.
Whatever's. My character's.
But is he taking a more global view, or does everyone have to take a more global view because of what's politically going on?
I think people are coming to terms with it in real time. You know, not in real time, but in an extremely tightly compressed amount of time. As we said in the panel, this takes, the first season was a 2-week period, I guess, and the second season is a 2.
Okay.
You know, so I mean, this is all happening very quickly for these characters. So it's not like they're having time to like ruminate about, well, I'm going to take a view that's more. I mean, this is all like quickly reacting to things as they happen, as quickly as they can. So for Chilton, Chilton's looking out for number one in a lot of ways still, but he may. I don't want to give away anything. He may learn that viewpoint of just looking out for number one, he may be able to include more, not globally, but at least more than just singularly. He might move beyond just the singular, you know, in a certain way. So yeah, but it's interesting to see how all of the characters react to the new situations that are thrown at them. But I don't know if I would divide it in terms of like local versus global. It's more sort of, no, yeah, I mean, the threat of a holocaust, you know, a nuclear holocaust is, you know, certainly a global problem, but everybody's so concerned with the immediate situation of survival and whatever their immediate surroundings are, that becomes paramount. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that did.
Yeah? You're like,
I wasn't thinking of the fact that it was 2 weeks. I mean, that really...
It's happening so quickly that it's no way to sort of, you're not able to sort of philosophically take a step back. It's like you're just dealing with everything that's coming at you very quickly. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, and I'm sure you get this a lot, but, you know, I think every decade has always said that fascism's coming back, but we're in a very strange political climate right now. Does it feel even stranger, like, creating this show in this political climate?
Well, I mean, foremost, I think it speaks to how truly timeless the novel is. I mean, you know, how prescient it was, and how incredibly powerful some of the fundamental thematic questions of the book are that we've tried to sort of lift into these character stories we're telling. So it's certainly not anything that one needs to fabricate for the purposes of this series. And you know, I mean, it is a decidedly, obviously, anti-fascist show, but I think what is so in some ways cunning about this type of series, unique from all others, is we get to sort of try to find our points of identification and what decisions we would make in those kinds of circumstances. And to your point, those choices, even as this is a different sort of historical world that they're visually living in, those choices politically, conceptually, and humanly are not that different. And that's what I think when we talk about these stories, and I mean, what I love about the series is each of these characters are living in such a time of great intensity where every decision matters. Matters to their survival, potentially matters to what effect they may have on the course of events, either within the resistance or obviously when you're talking about Berlin and some of the more sort of powerful offices. These are decisions that will have significant ramifications. So in that sense, I mean, we're living in a surreal time right now, and so the surreal of this series doesn't become quite as odd. And that's disturbing.
I think we wish it didn't reflect the world around us so much. You know what I mean? Honestly, I think we would all be much happier with less immediate topicality. You know what I mean? With less relevance to what's happening right now. And I also think that, well, the surreality is the real point. It is why the novel is so timeless and the story itself is so timeless. Is that we all know that feeling of looking at the world and saying, this can't be real right now. This isn't really happening. Is this really happening? And this book and the book in the series touch on it so well. This feeling of not only is it happening, but there may be something else happening as well. That's extremely relevant to our time. But also that feeling of what I think this show does really beautifully is it holds up a mirror to what we're going through, but it's a funhouse mirror where everything's refracted and completely reversed. So, the white people are colonialized, the Japanese are in power, and it lets you, it actually becomes something that allows you to emotionally experience the ramifications of what we're going through, but in this way that's even somehow amplified because of the distorted effect of it. You get to see so many more mirrors to our own world, which I think is such a beautiful thing that he did with the alternate reality, with Philip K. Dick did, and which the creators of the show have done.
Just the inherent difficulty of those choices. I mean, you can put yourself in John Smith's shoes, you can put yourself in Frank's shoes, and I mean, it's interesting in the writer's room, continually positing these conflicts and say, but which direction would you go? I mean, if you're choosing freedom, if you're choosing protection of your family, if you're going up against these powerful institutions that you could think, one person couldn't really have much of an impact at all. It is obviously what resonates with the real travesties of World War II, but those are, in different formulations, some of the same things we personally struggle with today.
It's a great way to illustrate, I guess, what people forget about in movies and TVs nowadays, which is empathy.
Yeah, very much so. And being able to empathize with things in a way that actually set up reverberations of empathy. Where you can see a Western culture which has been colonialized, and that makes you think, oh, those poor. But then it says, oh no, wait, where are the colonialized people? But hold on, who's disenfranchised now? It just lets you see things through. It's again that mirroring and echo chamber that it sets up, bouncing around in our own emotions. I think it's a very powerful tool.
Now, originally in the book, I think before the show came out, there was discussions about how things were being changed. Like, for example, the grasshopper was turned into a film, and there are different things that were changed. Obviously, we added John Smith as a character. How do you guys make those decisions to, keep with the theme, but make decisions to change things within the book, obviously? And as the show goes on and continues, eventually there's going to be, no more book. How do you kind of use that as inspiration to continue forward and find your own voice and stories?
I mean, foremost, that was sort of fundamentally Frank's greatest, obviously, legacy in the way that he created the show was being able to find ways of drawing from the book, still being very much rooted in the DNA of the book, but adapting it in a manner that will best hopefully serve a compelling drama within a visual medium. And so some of those decisions were made fairly early on, but all of those things were discussed with Issa and her team, because no one wanted to fundamentally betray anything, from the novel, even as there were many aspects of that we had to change. I mean, and what you mentioned on the panel, I mean, a lot of us wanted children in the first episode because the book begins with him. But what the book doesn't have is sort of a narrative construct, that one could really establish to hopefully serve a long-running series. So in that respect, they immediately recognized that there were going to have to be decisions made that reformulated a lot of the ingredients and sort of character lines that would find an entirely different course in the TV show. I mean, obviously, Juliana didn't kill Joe. There's a culmination, even as open-ended as that novel is, that, obviously we had to make some different choices. But it's the open-endedness of the book that gave us the confidence that there was an ongoing series in this, because we were really interested to say, well, what happens with these characters beyond that? They had a destination.
It's not a linear narrative. I mean, the book just lends itself to serialization because it's circular in its structure, and also it's extremely short in terms of what it actually covers. So it's so open. It doesn't. It's like the opening half of the book. In fact, he wanted to write the second. Yeah. So I mean, it's a launching point in itself, which makes it so much more rewarding to narratively take and expand, because it's not like you're taking Pride and Prejudice, which is a beginning, Aristotelian structure, and then just exploding it. You're taking something which is just this incredible idea, and hopefully, letting it flower into these fruitful, beautiful ways.
What did you use for Robert Children? I mean, for Children's character, what did you pull from
the book?
Yeah, what was the main thing that
No, I mean, the book is so wonderful as a character study of this man that that's my touchstone, is I want to do that justice. It's such an incredible character to get to play that I just want to do that book, that character service. I feel like, and I use the book as the touchstone for that in a way, because the book is it's such a window into his thought processes and it's so rich as an actor to be able to look right at that and say, okay, that's literally what he's thinking right now, that I want to honor that, while at the same time taking it and then hopefully letting that impulse lead us into new avenues and new storylines, which are not necessarily in the book, but honor it.
Question about segueing away from the show. There's you said that in the panel that it took 9 years to get this done. What is your belief that made it finally become a reason that this was picked up? Is it just because we have an expansion of Netflix and Amazon? Is it there's more outlets, or?
I think it's a combination of things. I mean, thinking back 9 years, if we can remember what the TV landscape looked like then, how many shows were getting made and how many buyers there were. I mean, this is extraordinarily challenging material, and I can't tell you how many writers we approached who couldn't crack this. And so our original landing in the UK with a different writer, had provided one interpretation from it, but there was really no welcome for it when we originally took it to market in 2006 or 7. When we brought it back and the landscape had expanded as much as it did, it opened us up obviously to more non-commercial opportunities outside of HBO and Showtime, which there weren't that many back then. It required a certain financial support that a lot of broadcasters really didn't have. But I think what it ultimately, ironically, provided for Amazon in particular is, in a world of hundreds of series, there is none like this. So I think it was in Amazon trying to sort of aggressively maneuver into series on the comedy and drama side that have no corollary. Ultimately, that which people were most uneasy with about the show made it what was so appealing to Amazon.
This will be a one-day release all season.
Yeah.
Does that change the way that the episodes are structured? Because I've heard this question before from another show producer. I'm trying to call it. They said that, I don't want to use Game of Thrones, but a lot of shows, they almost end at a point where, like, damn it, when's next week start? You know what I mean? And sometimes now you're almost a movie. This is a movie now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Is that right to say, or?
It's absolutely right to say, and I'd say we're still in sort of the nascent stages of learning that. Because it has effect on you from an architectural standpoint. Even the way that they're continually adjusting the fact that you're watching something, and as soon as the credits run, it's counting down to when it's going to start on you again. It's like you're making a choice, but you're making kind of a passive choice, which is not to shut it off, which is kind of an unusual circumstance. But also having a release like this is unusual. When you do Good Wife, you're getting audience reaction, even though you're writing ahead. you're feeding off of that, and you're reading off of that, and you also have an opportunity to respond to how things are creatively developing. Here, as you said, it's really a 10-hour film that we're putting in.
Does it change the reason I brought that up is because now a lot of reviewers and bloggers review it as a whole.
Right.
So you don't see an episode like this episode was a 9. You know what I mean? You're almost behind the 8 ball. Because now you have to have a full product from start to finish that is at pace that, you know, for the actors it has to be tough because there's no, you know, you can't segue into a phase where you're not conveying too much action or too much content. So that's why I asked that.
Yeah, that's a good question.
No, it's I think, and I imagine some universities are starting to teach it if they're going in, looking into sort of the
10-hour movie, the 10-hour, 20-hour movie format.
Yes, it is very much its own form, and early on in the first year, I mean, we had a lot of conversations about it. I mean, and talking with Frank and trying to figure out, all right, well, what since you may be working within a traditional 3-act structure, obviously you have no act breaks. And even thinking from the serialized standpoint, well, do we contain our entire ensemble within each episode, or do we start segregating, which is what we experimented with this year, where certain characters we would indulge more fully, and you look at how much do you want to escalate each of those stories, and then what may be the climactic or culmination of that. Last year, I mean, we had so many episodes where we sort of escalated into these grand sort of almost operatic montages, which was one way to try, but I think we're constantly experimenting with the grander moments and some of the more the smaller but perhaps equally impactful character moments that may, you know, you want to compel the viewer to continue through the experience. I mean, in that way, I don't think it's any different than fiction. You know, you get to the end of the chapter, are you on that ride enough to say, I want to keep going? And we're always trying to discover what the equivalent of that is.
And do you like that format? Are you enjoying trying to meet that challenge, or do you prefer other forms?
No, I think it's fascinating. I mean, honestly, the thrill of working in television right now is that from a format standpoint,
Wild West.
yes, it's like anything is possible. So whereas typically you hearken back to, you know, when we all lived in a traditional sort of network reality where you lived in franchise shows and it was cops, you know, and lawyers, and you knew what you had to accomplish. It was very regimented.
I just can't get into these.
I've lost my train of thought. I mean, in this,
What you're
in
saying
this,
is so interesting.
in this world, it's servicing the story, and as long as we have enough Brennan, people go home happy.
So we get a whole episode of him next season.
Yeah.
We're working on it, but the others keep rejecting it.
Wow.
I'll start the hashtag.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well done. Thank you.